Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. Oh, and this is a whopper. It's Dvořák's Requiem, featuring István Kertész and the London Symphony Orchestra on Decca. The soloists are, Pilar Lorengar. Yeah, she's terrific. Erzsébet Komlósi. Probably didn't pronounce that right, and I don't care. Robert Ilostfalvi, they're Hungarian, and Tom Krause, oh thank God, somebody I can pronounce, with the Ambrosian singers and the London Symphony Orchestra. Now, why is this one of the greatest recordings ever? Well, at the time that this was recorded, which was in like 1960-something, was it 1970, 1960-something? Let me see. Let's find out, shall we? I mean, it has this wonderful booklet. This is the SACD whatever box with all the symphonies and tone poems and other goodies that he did. Tiffany's Overtures, Tone Poems, Requiem. Does it actually give a date? Yes, it does give a date. Thank God I'll be able to find the date. Here we go. Oh, there's an audio Blu-ray disc. Isn't that exciting? It's blue. The only problem is pages are stuck together. No, they're not. Where's the Requiem? Up there's the Requiem. Here it is. Okay, so Requiem, 1969. I was close enough. So when this was recorded, Dvořák's Requiem was as good as unknown. It's one of the 5 great choral requiem settings of the extended 19th century, what you might call the long 19th century, which means it can bleed over at either end. It begins with the Mozart, of course, and then you've got Berlioz, all 6 requiem settings, right? Berlioz and Verdi and Brahms, and then on the other end there's Fauré, and then we get this one, Dvořák. And this is the least known of them all, even less known than the Berlioz, which is hard to believe because the Berlioz is very rarely encountered due to its size. It is one of the big, super-duper grand, complete ones, like the Berlioz and Verdi's and those people. A big symphonic setting of the full Latin text, or the more or less full Latin text. And of all the composers, Dvořák was the only one who was really religious of this batch, those, at least of those 3. It's an amazing setting, and it gets no credit at all. What fascinates me about it, first of all, isn't just that it's full of glorious music, I mean, gorgeous music with wonderful solos and big choruses and all kinds of stuff like that. But what really gets me is that it seems that the less religious people are more interested in a sort of projecting a generalized feeling of consolation and peace and tranquility at the end. Dvořák is having none of it. His ending is absolutely icy cold and desolate and bleak. It's really pretty harrowing. An amazing setting when you think about it. A really vivid and visceral coming to terms with the reality of death. And the focus is not on the promise of eternal life afterwards. It's really bleak and very powerful for that reason too. It's a little bit more like Britain's War Requiem in that sense. It's full of strife and turmoil and dread and fear and all those fabulous emotions that are wonderful when they achieve an apt musical setting, which they certainly do here. Bernard Shaw hated the piece. He hated requiems generally. He thought that they were diseased and unhealthy and that nobody should write them. He thought Brahms was like the worst of all, the German requiem. But we don't care what he thought about it. It is an extraordinary piece. Especially if you do it the way Dvořák intended that you do it, which is that, at the reprise of the Dies Irae with the random clangor of bells at the climax of the chorus, which you really hear here. You can really hear them. And it's just thrilling. The sonics were really good in this recording. The organ pedals are well caught. It's just a tremendous work. Now, there was competition for this, the competition coming from Karel Ančerl and the Czech Philharmonic on Supraphon, which is also a splendid performance, even though it doesn't use the bells. It's a wonderful performance, but this one I think was more important. And I think it's every bit as good. It really is. It's even more exciting and powerful sonically. But I think the reason this one is one of the greatest recordings ever is because it was so necessary for these pieces to be heard by non-Czech performers. Great though Antril is, and amazing as it was that he did it actually in communist Czechoslovakia, which was not a hospitable environment for religious works generally. But really, if these pieces were ever going to have wider currency and be appreciated for the universal masterpieces that they are, they had to be taken out of the purely local context in which they were normally being performed. This happened with Janacek's operas, for example, and lots of other pieces too. Dvořák, of course, was not a merely local talent. He was a universal talent, and he had connections everywhere. Remember, he traveled. He was in the U.S., he worked there, he was in the U.K., he was the ambassador of Czech music to the rest of the world. But a lot of his works have remained sort of Czech specialty pieces. But this is something that shouldn't be. It's one of the great Requiem settings ever, and one of the most powerful, and it's unique, and it has its own character and its own color, and it's all Dvořák. It's vintage Dvořák. He was very, very serious in his choral works, in his selection of texts, and in the importance that he ascribed to them. And so to just dismiss it or ignore it, as a sort of occasional novelty really is not to do the music justice, in my view anyway. And so to have this pop up in the 60s was really special. And it, of course, didn't get much attention. It got some attention because Kertész had done the Dvořák symphonies, but it was smart of Decca to record this work and the tone poems and all the other pieces that Kertész did to piggyback on his recordings of the symphonies, because they weren't known. Nobody knew the Dvořák tone poems when Kertész recorded them. Nobody knew the Requiem. All these pieces that were as good as unknown. And this was an expensive proposition. It was a big project. And I suspect that everybody was a little surprised at just how glorious the whole thing was. But of course, it didn't get a lot of promotion. It didn't get a lot of attention because, aesthetically speaking, critics and audiences, not audiences, I don't know, but critics at the time weren't prepared to credit Dvořák with the ability to write these big, profound, sacred works. And I find that astonishing because, like I said, of all the composers who were writing sacred music, Dvořák was a serious believer. His Stabat Mater has always been tremendously well respected, but the other two big choral works, the Requiem, and then it's shorter, but it's glorious, the Te Deum, get virtually no attention whatsoever. And I don't get it. I truly don't get it. This was a recording which, if anything was going to make the case, it would. But it would have required a much more sustained effort on the part of Decca advocating for the work in order for that to happen. And it didn't, but that's okay. That still makes it one of the greatest recordings ever. So keep on listening, friends, and thanks for joining me. Take care.